The rear passenger seat was occupied by a suitcase, forcing her to sit in the most uncomfortable position, right in the middle of the back row. This was completely unreasonable. Anyone who has ever sat in the middle of the back row of an SUV knows it's the most uncomfortable position. The floor is raised, there are no armrests, and there's limited legroom. While the back row was completely empty, Yeon Kun chose to sit in such an uncomfortable position instead of the more comfortable sides. It was as if she had been forced to sit there. An even more disturbing detail was her clothing. Yeon Kun was wearing only underwear and was barefoot, as if she was preparing to sleep or had just woken up. In contrast, Jo Jin was fully dressed in a thick down jacket. This discrepancy couldn't be explained by any reasonable cause. At this point, all investigative arrows pointed to one person, Jo Jin. The emerging picture showed this might not have been a sudden accident, but possibly a carefully calculated plan. But one big question remained. With him also being so severely injured, what motive could have driven Jo Jin to take such a reckless action? The investigation team found themselves in a dilemma. The suspicions were gradually forming in their minds, but drawing hasty conclusions could have unforeseeable consequences. After all, this was a married couple, and Jo Jin was also hospitalized with serious injuries. If they shared these suspicions with the family, it would certainly cause a major shock to relatives on both sides. But with so many abnormalities, they couldn't simply treat this as an ordinary traffic accident. Time pressure began to mount as Yeon Kun's family couldn't wait any longer. The pain of loss made them want to hold a funeral for the deceased as soon as possible. To complete the necessary procedures, police asked the family to bring Yeon Kun's personal documents. The grieving relatives set off for the Beijing apartment to search. Then, something no one expected happened. While searching for documents, they accidentally discovered a suitcase containing a horrifying secret. It wasn't ordinary paperwork, but a mountain of thick insurance contracts. The 20-inch suitcase was stuffed to the brim with 30 different insurance contracts, covering most of the major insurance companies in the market. All were personal accident insurance policies, with Yeon Kun and Jo Jin listed as each other's beneficiaries. These insurance policies were numerous, each with enormous value, with premiums reaching tens of thousands of yuan per year. When totaled up, a
Sewing.
terrifying figure emerged: 29 million yuan, approximately $4.2 million, the amount Jo Jin would receive if Yeon Kun died in an accident. What made everyone even more suspicious was the arrangement of beneficiaries. Both Yeon Kun and Jo Jin had been through a previous marriage, each having children from their former relationships. Both of their parents were also still alive and healthy. But in the beneficiary list, there were no names of children or parents from either side, only each other's names. Why would the two decide to buy such an enormous amount of insurance and designate only each other? This discovery was like lightning striking clear skies. Yeon Kun's family stood stunned by this truth, unable to believe what they had just uncovered. At the same time, this was precisely the important clue the investigation team had been seeking. The picture began to clear. This might not have been a simple accident, but a meticulously planned crime. With this discovery, the decision to perform an autopsy on Yeon Kun became inevitable. Faced with this evidence, Yeon Kun's family made a painful but necessary decision. They agreed to allow the autopsy. But the suitcase full of insurance contracts had
Thank
changed
you.
everything. Now they not only wanted to know how their daughter had died, but also to find the truth behind this death. A kind woman like Yeon Kun couldn't pass away so mysteriously. While waiting for results from the forensic department, the investigation team didn't sit idle. They launched a large-scale investigation campaign, checking every security camera in the city to reconstruct the couple's final journey. This meticulous work paid off. 53 valuable images captured every movement of the vehicle on that fateful day. The timeline began to emerge clearly. Early morning at 9:03 a.m., the first camera caught Jo Jin and Yeon Kun on Liberation Road. Both were present in the car, appearing like a normal couple preparing to start their day. Afternoon at 1:19 p.m.,
Thank
the car left the
you.
city center heading toward the suburbs. By 5:00 p.m., they had appeared on the highway to Beijing. But this was when strange things began to happen. At 5:20 p.m., cameras recorded Joe Jin driving into a roadside rest area. Notably, only he got out of the car and went into the restaurant, while Yan Kun remained in the vehicle. Why wouldn't the wife get out to rest during such a long journey? But what puzzled the entire investigation team was that at 7:20 p.m., the car suddenly turned around, once again heading toward Jinzhou instead of continuing to Beijing as planned. The last image of the car was recorded around 8 p.m. at a location only 1.9 miles from the accident scene, too close to be mere coincidence. Another disturbing detail stood out from these 53 photos. Only in the morning could Yan Kun be seen in the front seat. In all other images, only Joe Jin was alone in the driver's compartment. This was completely abnormal for a couple traveling together. Joe Jin's journey also lacked logic. His family lived right in Jinzhou City, but after returning, he didn't visit his parents and instead appeared in a remote, deserted area near the morgue. There was no reasonable explanation for this behavior. Faced with these obvious contradictions, the investigation team decided to go to the hospital to directly question Joe Jin. Lying on the hospital bed with a pale face, Joe Jin recounted his story in what seemed like a sincere manner. He emphasized the serious injuries he had suffered. 3 severed intestinal sections, both legs crushed, as if trying to prove he was also a victim. According to Joe Jin's account, that day they had visited a local temple together, then set off for Beijing. Halfway through, he suddenly remembered important business to discuss with his sister, so decided to return to Jinzhou. Around 8 p.m., guessing his sister wasn't home yet, he parked by the roadside to rest. After 10 p.m., both woke up and continued driving, but being unfamiliar with the terrain, they got lost and eventually went astray into the accident area. The tragedy occurred when Yan Kun was using her phone while holding a cup of water, accidentally spilling hot water on her husband, causing him to lose composure and cause the accident. However, the investigation team found 2 cups in the car, a metal thermal cup and a plastic cup. But both were carefully covered with lids, showing no signs of having been opened or spilled. This raised major questions about the accuracy of Joe Jin's testimony. A more serious contradiction emerged when Joe Jin insisted that he and his wife had dined together at the rest area. But irrefutable evidence from security cameras showed a completely different reality. Only Joe Jin alone left the vehicle and entered the dining area, while Yan Kun never appeared. This wasn't forgetfulness or oversight. This was intentional lying. At this point, the forensic examination results also provided clues. Through autopsy examination, Yan Kun in this accident suffered severe skull fractures. Nearly all ribs on the right side of her chest were broken. The entire right chest was in a collapsed state. The sternum was severed, and the spine was broken. Each of these injuries was fatal, and the actual cause of death was indeed traffic accident fatality. But the forensic examiner was puzzled that despite such severe injuries, Yan Kun's body showed no defensive wounds. Normally, when people encounter danger, instinct causes them to use both hands to protect their body, or instinctively resist. But in such a tragic car accident, Yan Kun's hands showed no signs of this instinctive defensive behavior. This proved that when the accident occurred, Yan Kun was either asleep or in an unconscious state. The situation seemed to become complex. Police then sequentially tested Yan Kun's heart blood and chest cavity blood, as well as food in her stomach. This time, there was a major discovery. 2 types of nerve-inhibiting drugs were found in Yan Kun's body, carbamazepine and chlordiazepoxide. Both drugs can cause drowsiness and unconsciousness, with the chlordiazepoxide content in Yan Kun's body reaching levels sufficient to cause poisoning. When police combined all these clues together, everything that happened in this accident seemed explainable. Joe Jin, to fraudulently obtain a large insurance payout, used drugs to render his wife unconscious, then under conditions of full self-protection, drove straight into the wall. Under normal circumstances, classifying the case as a traffic accident wouldn't be possible. After all, Joe Jin was also seriously injured. Fortunately, the traffic police were responsible and thorough, digging deep into the suspicious aspects of the accident, peeling away layers of fog to reveal the truth. The case investigation had become very clear at this point. Next, they just needed to find concrete evidence to bring Joe Jin to justice. The search of Joe Jin's home brought heartbreaking and surprising discoveries. Among the personal belongings, the investigation team found 36 pages written on both sides. Love letters Joe Jin had written to his ex-wife. These letters were carefully hidden and always carried with him. This revealed a painful truth. Although he appeared happy with Yan Kun in his second marriage, Joe Jin's heart still belonged to someone else. When delving into the financial situation, a picture of financial disaster gradually emerged. Joe Jin's bank account was not only empty, but deeply in debt. His stock trading account had lost 3 million yuan, approximately $435,000. Whether in Jinju or Beijing, he owned no real estate and had no stable source of income. But ironically, Joe Jin always tried to show Yan Kun's family that he was a wealthy and successful man. He constantly patched up his finances by borrowing from one place to pay another, even mortgaging Yan Kun's house in Beijing to have money to take his wife traveling everywhere, creating an appearance of luxury and affluence. The harsh truth was that even the mortgaged house was bought with money from Yan Kun's parents. Joe Jin was living off his wife's family's money while pretending to be the provider. The financial burden on Joe Jin's shoulders continued to pile up. Besides maintaining a fake
Thank
luxurious
you.
lifestyle with Yan Kun, he also had to bear the responsibility of supporting his daughter from his previous marriage.
How can I
The
collect
girl
that
was
one?
studying at a prestigious private school in Beijing with enormous tuition
It's
fees of
what's that?
150,000
Diamond.
yuan, 21,700 per year, an expense Joe Jin had to bear completely alone. Additionally, the couple spent 180,000 yuan, $26,000 annually on insurance contracts. By the time before the accident, Joe Jin was deep in debt for over 6 million yuan, approximately $870,000. Without some miracle, complete bankruptcy was just a matter of time. Combined with insincere feelings toward his current wife, all this created a clear criminal motive. The investigation team decided to focus on two key breakthrough directions. First was tracing the source of the toxic
We
substances
love
in
you.
Yan Kun's body.
Smile will
Second
make
was
you
finding evidence
famous.
proving Joe Jin had intentionally caused the accident.
Thank
Yan Kun's family
you.
provided important medical information. Yan Kun had suffered from epilepsy as a child, but after giving birth, the condition had completely remitted. Therefore,
Thank you.
finding carbamazepine, an epilepsy medication, in her body was completely reasonable. However, chlordiazepoxide was an entirely different story. Not only was there no reason for this drug to appear in Yan Kun's body, but it was also extremely dangerous for her as it could trigger epileptic seizures again. This was precisely the type of medication Yan Kun absolutely should not use. But despite extensive verification, police found no records of Joe Jin and Yan Kun purchasing chlordiazepoxide. The drug clue was
Take care.
broken,
Thank
but there
you.
was a major discovery in the vehicle information. Most people might not know that cars also have devices similar to airplane black boxes. They record the driving status of the car during accidents in parametric form, including engine speed and a series of vehicle information. This type of car black box is technically called an airbag control module, as it controls airbag deployment and records vehicle information at the moment of deployment. Police urgently found the crashed car's module and sent it for examination. The examination report quickly provided chilling information. In the period from 4.2 seconds to 0.2 seconds before the accident occurred, the car's speed increased straight from 51 miles per hour to 55 miles per hour, with engine RPM jumping from 2,400 to 4,000 RPM in an instant. Until the final moment of impact, the brakes were never activated. All the data showed that Joe Jin was forcefully pressing the gas pedal and pressing it to the extreme until crashing into the wall. At this point, police determined Joe Jin was involved in intentional murder and insurance fraud. Therefore, police quickly went to Joe Jin's home to arrest him. When police mentioned taking Joe Jin's phone for temporary custody, Joe Jin suddenly became particularly sensitive and stubborn. Joe Jin craftily claimed sometimes that the phone wasn't at home, other times questioning the police and threatening to find a lawyer. He forgot that police had just called his phone before arriving, making denial impossible. He pulled his phone out from under the mattress. Seeing Joe Jin's panic and constant reluctance to hand over his phone, police astutely sensed there must be problems with the phone. After obtaining Joe Jin's phone, a WeChat money transfer record caught police attention. The recipient had the ID Sex Girl, and the transfer amount was 530 yuan, 77. Police checked Sex Girl's WeChat personal page and found she was an online seller of sex products. After deeper police investigation, they discovered Joe Jin had bought the powerful sedative triazolam, a drug listed by the state as controlled, with strong sedative effects. It turned out the
Space
person with
Ranger.
ID Sex Girl had posted information selling triazolam on her personal page, clearly writing it was a powerful sedative with fast action, colorless and odorless, causing people to quickly become unconscious. This personal status was only posted for 45 minutes before Joe Jin transferred money to her. During police interrogation, Joe Jin admitted to buying triazolam, but he lied, saying he bought it for his mother to help her sleep. This lie was too unbelievable. Because Joe Jin's sister worked at a hospital, if medication was needed, Joe Jin wouldn't need to buy it. Even if Joe Jin bought it for his mother's insomnia, spending 530 yuan on sleeping pills made no sense. So police investigated slowly, layer by layer, and found the person who sold drugs to Joe Jin, surname
Thank
Ho.
you. Wait lang.
Howe confessed that he actually didn't sell triazolam, but used chlordiazepoxide to counterfeit triazolam for sale, because triazolam was a banned drug under strict supervision. Howe devised a method of using chlordiazepoxide to fake triazolam, hanging a sheep's head while selling dog meat. At this point, police finally clarified the source of chlordiazepoxide in Yang Kun's body. The chain of evidence was clear. When the entire case became clear to Yang Kun's family, they were extremely shocked. No one knew Joe Jin was such a person with a human face but beast's heart. Normally, Joe Jin appeared particularly thoughtful and meticulous toward Yang Kun in front of her family, caring for Yang Kun devotedly. Yang Kun's parents were very comforted, not only not minding that Joe Jin didn't have Beijing household registration, but also sold their old house in East Third Ring Road to buy them a 1,916 square foot house. Yang Kun's parents didn't need their daughter to be wealthy. They just hoped she could live happily. Who would have thought, you can know someone's face, but not their heart? When Joe Jin's case of murdering his wife for insurance fraud was exposed, Yang Kun's family remembered another accident involving Yang Kun and Joe Jin 2 months earlier, which truly made people shudder. At the end of 2017, the couple had experienced another accident on a deserted coastal road in Jinzhou. Also after 11 p.m., also with Joe Jin driving, also the same familiar car crashing straight into a streetlight pole. The hollow pole was broken in half from the impact, but fortunately both were wearing seatbelts. Joe Jin wasn't drinking. The airbags functioned normally, so no one was seriously injured. But Yang Kun had been unconscious for 3.5 hours. At that time, Yang Kun was taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, and doctors also found it very strange. Through examination, they found no medical reason to explain Yang Kun's unconscious state. The medical team's confusion was clearly shown in the diagnostic report, with 3 large question marks. When doctors wanted to conduct additional tests to investigate the cause, Yang Kun woke up and was hastily taken home by Joe Jin. At that time, Yang Kun's mother thought her daughter's epilepsy had relapsed, and was even grateful to Joe Jin for his devoted care. She had no idea that everything was just experimental steps in Joe Jin's cruel plan.
Thank
2
you.
months later, that plan was executed perfectly, and Yang Kun paid the price with her very life. Even when evidence piled up like mountains, Joe Jin stubbornly refused to admit his crimes. Finally, in November 2021, justice was served when Joe Jin received the death penalty, a fitting end for someone who had betrayed marital trust in the most ruthless way. This was not just punishment for an individual, but also a strong warning to those harboring evil intentions, because the law may come slowly, but it never fails to appear. We hope this heartbreaking story will help us
Yes.
treasure sincere feelings in life more, while always staying alert to potential dangers around us. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next videos.
Supports facial brain connection.
directions for faster movement. Everything seemed perfectly normal until a woman was suddenly dragged away in broad daylight, right before the astonished eyes of the town's only witness. A few minutes later, the peaceful morning atmosphere was shattered into chaos. In front of a small restaurant, Mexican Chicken, two aggressive young men were seen restraining a young woman, Lee Sim-hee, 26, the shop owner. Despite her fierce resistance, they pushed her into a gray car waiting nearby, and in just a few seconds, the car sped away before anyone could react. At that moment, the entire neighborhood was still immersed in the silence of the morning. Yu Su-ja was the only witness to the horrifying scene. She stood motionless in the middle of the street, trying to regain her composure, before running into her house to call the police. She reported that two men had just forced a woman into a car, and that the woman was the owner of Mexican Chicken. As soon as the call came in, it didn't take long for the story of the daylight kidnapping to spread throughout the town. It was a strange and unprecedented crime in this normally peaceful rural area. Residents were frightened, stunned, and full of questions. Why would someone kidnap Lee Sim-hee, a kind, friendly woman who had always treated her neighbors warmly? Panic spread quickly. People locked their doors. Children were locked in their homes. Housewives whispered in disbelief. How could such a horrible thing happen right in their neighborhood? But just a few hours later, things took a darker turn. When the police arrived at the scene and tried to contact Sim-hee's husband, Seong Byung-jip, to inform him of what had happened, they discovered that he had also been missing since the previous day. The police immediately launched an urgent investigation. They began with the testimony of the only witness, Suk-ja. According to her, one of the kidnappers had long hair, while the other had curly hair. One of them was about 5 feet 7 inches tall. Unfortunately, she could not remember the license plate number. Investigators quickly turned to the victim's personal life. They discovered that the couple had been married for less than a year. Before moving, Byung-jip had worked in the sales department of the main branch of a Mexican fried chicken chain in Daegu, while Sim-hee worked as an accountant. After getting married, they moved to Hapshin-yup and opened their own fried chicken shop in hopes of starting a new life together. Due to financial constraints, they rented an old storefront and lived in a small room behind the kitchen. The early days were difficult, but they believed that with hard work, they could make it. After 9 months, they had started saving some money. Their next goal was to move into a better house and start a family. But things began to change on the afternoon of July 22nd. Police confirmed that this was the last time Byung-jip was seen. After receiving a strange call at the shop, he told his wife that he had to go out, but would be back soon. He never returned. That night, Sim-hee managed the shop alone, growing increasingly worried. As the hours passed without any news, she went to the police to file a report, but their reaction was lukewarm. They assumed he had probably just had a drink and decided to go somewhere. Distraught and overwhelmed, she returned home and stayed up all night, anxiously waiting for news of her husband. But the next morning, before she could collect herself or figure out what to do next, two unknown men suddenly appeared, stormed into the shop, and abducted her in broad daylight. From that incident, police quickly concluded that this was part of a larger, coordinated crime. It was likely that Byung-jip had been lured out and murdered first. Fearing that Sim-hee might report the crime or identify the culprits, the perpetrators returned the next day to abduct her and silence the only possible witness. Just 2 days later, on the afternoon of July 24th, 1993, around 1 p.m., a distress call was made to the Hapcheon County Police Department. On the line was a young man, breathing heavily and clearly panicked, reporting that he had just found a dead body near a creek in the village of Yangju-myeon, within Hapcheon County. The caller was Mr. Yu, a 26-year-old local resident. While walking through the nearby forest to collect firewood, he came across a large moss-covered object near the stream. Thinking it was a dead animal, he moved closer, only to realize to his horror that it was a human body. The body was lying lying on its side, already beginning to decompose slightly in the summer heat, and curiously, it had not been concealed, as if someone had intentionally left it there in plain sight. Upon receiving the report, police rushed to the scene. When an officer shined a flashlight on the face of the deceased,
Philippines.
Seong Byung-jip, the very man whose disappearance
Okay.
was reported by his wife less than 48
Malaki
hours
ito.
earlier.
Maliit to.
A preliminary autopsy
Ano
was
ba
conducted
talaga?
on site. A clear strangulation mark was found on the victim's neck, leading investigators to conclude that the cause of death was asphyxiation from strangulation with a hard object. Surprisingly, there were no other injuries or signs of struggle, something that puzzled investigators, as Byung-jip was a healthy 26-year-old man in good physical condition. Based on forensic findings, the estimated time of death was early evening on July 22nd, the same day he left the store after receiving the mysterious phone call. This further supported the theory that the killer had lured him outside and murdered him that very day, before returning the next morning to kidnap his wife. With this lead, the investigation turned toward people who were acquainted with the young couple. Police questioned co-workers, friends, relatives, neighbors, and nearby shopkeepers. However, no one reported any personal conflicts or bad blood. In fact, everyone described the couple as kind, gentle, and well-liked in the community. With no personal motive uncovered, police shifted to the theory of robbery-motivated murder. Sure enough, on the morning of July 23rd, just hours after Simhee's abduction, $3,700 was withdrawn from her savings account at Nonghyuk Bank's Hapcheon branch. Based on the value of money in 1993, that amount represented nearly all of the couple's savings after almost a year of running their small business.
Yes, nagsabay na ako kay ate
Investigators
kanina.
followed the trail to the bank,
Ha?
hoping for a breakthrough. But once
Na?
again, they hit a dead end.
Ano?
Due to the technology of that time,
Kagabi pa yata yan.
camera system. In that situation, their only option was to search for eyewitnesses. Because of this, the three employees who were on the morning shift that day were brought in for questioning. They all remembered serving a young man who withdrew the entire amount from Simhee's savings account, presenting both her passbook and official seal, requirements for withdrawal at the time. However, what shocked investigators was that all three gave completely different descriptions of the suspect. Not only were their statements inconsistent, they were almost impossible to reconcile. One employee described the man as tall with short hair. Another insisted he was short with thick, messy hair. The third said he appeared gentle and completely ordinary. Due to these conflicting accounts, police had a hard time creating a composite profile of the suspect. They began narrowing down potential suspects to men in the area with similar physical characteristics and financial hardship. Initially, 8 individuals made the list. However, the verification process quickly narrowed the investigation. The first man was confirmed to be at work, with co-workers backing his alibi. The second was in Seoul with his family. The third was in the hospital recovering from surgery. As for suspects 4 through 8, each had clear and verifiable alibis. Just as it seemed the case had hit a dead end, police received a tip about a man named Choi, 29 years old, living in Chogak County, North Gyeongsang Province, about 45 miles from Hapcheon. He closely resembled witness descriptions and had previously worked as a chicken delivery driver at the Mexico chicken chain. With this lead, investigators immediately dispatched 2 detectives to Choi's home on the evening of August 6th. He was brought to the station for questioning regarding details related to the case. That very night, Choi, 29 years old, was taken to the Hapcheon County Police Department, where he would begin a long and harrowing chapter of his life. Initially, officers reassured him that if he cooperated, he'd be released shortly. But that promise never came true. Once the interrogation room door closed, a nightmare of torture, coerced confessions, and human rights violations began. From that point on, Choi was held in the interrogation room continuously for 4 days. He was denied food, water, and refused to leave the room. He was beaten, tied to a chair, and relentlessly
Na
interrogated,
ano, infam?
accused of kidnapping and murder. Though Choi repeatedly insisted he was innocent, no one listened. For the investigators, he was the missing piece they needed to close a high-profile case under mounting public pressure. And yet, the confession they wanted didn't come easily. Despite being physically and mentally broken, Choi maintained his statement. He had never met Sim Hee or Byung Jip, didn't know the victims, and had no connection to the case. He had no criminal record, no relationship with the couple, and no evidence placed him in Hapcheon on the day of the crime. Meanwhile, doubts about Choi's guilt began to surface outside the station. Neighbors, co-workers, and friends came forward, providing testimony that he was with them from the night of July 22nd through the morning
Masarap.
of July 23rd, the exact time frame of the crime. They submitted witness statements, photos, and receipts, showing that Choi had been dining and singing karaoke in Chilgon. These pieces of evidence made it clear he could not have been at the scene of the crime. Amid growing public outrage, police were forced to release Choi on August 10th. But the man who walked out of the station was no longer the same. His face was bruised and swollen. He limped as he walked, and not long after, he collapsed and had to be hospitalized. Doctors confirmed that Choi had suffered 2 broken ribs, extensive bruising, and severe psychological trauma. Refusing to suffer in silence, Choi filed a formal complaint with the Gyeongsangnam-do prosecutor's office, demanding an investigation into the unlawful detention and coerced interrogation. The case quickly exploded into one of the biggest scandals in South Korea's law enforcement community during the 1990s. Human rights groups spoke out, and the media uncovered a series of violations committed during the investigation. The damage went far beyond Choi's personal suffering. It also brought the entire investigation to a standstill. Once his innocence was confirmed, police were left with nothing. No new witnesses, no forensic evidence at the scene, and the real perpetrator had vanished without a trace. As a result, the case slowly faded into obscurity, surviving only in the form of whispered rumors throughout Hapcheon. Some believed that Sim Hee had been sold overseas as part of a human trafficking ring. In the 1990s, cases of women being abducted and forced into labor or marriage, often trafficked into China, were not widespread, but they did happen. Others speculated that she had been murdered shortly after the money was withdrawn from her bank account. Despite the various theories, one fact remained undeniable. The perpetrator knew the victim very well. The person knew that Sim Hee kept both her savings passbook and official seal, both required to withdraw money at the time. He knew he would be alone and was familiar with the couple's daily routine. All of this strongly pointed to the likelihood that the killer was someone close to them. The prolonged silence, combined with a flood of unanswered questions, ultimately turned this case into a stain on South Korea's investigative history. A double disappearance with no suspect, no clear motive, and no solid leads. Despite hundreds of hours spent on interrogations, interviews, and distributing flyers across the Gyeongsangnam region, the case was officially suspended in 1994 due to a lack of evidence. But then, in mid-1994, almost a year after the case was closed, an unexpected twist emerged from the Nongyu Bank branch in Hapcheon County. Mr. Nam, a longtime employee who had worked the morning of July 23, 1993, the exact day Sim Hee disappeared, sent a letter to the Gyeongsangnam-do Provincial Investigation Office. In his letter, he wrote that he wasn't entirely certain, but he believed he had recently recognized the man who made the withdrawal that day. He claimed to have seen the man again at an auto repair shop in Hamon County. That brief handwritten note immediately caught the attention of investigators. Previously, statements from bank employees had been contradictory and deemed unreliable. But this time, Mr. Nam had taken the initiative to reach out, suggesting his memory had been triggered by a strong visual impression. Following the details in the letter, investigators traced the lead to an auto repair shop off National Route 5, about 30 miles from Hapcheon County. There, they met a man named Kang, 32 years old, with a prior conviction for fraud and currently working as a mechanic. His appearance, including his tall frame and curly hair, was a striking match to the original sketch provided by witness Sukja and the bank employee. Continuing the investigation, police conducted discreet surveillance and discovered that Kang had previously lived in the city of Gumi. In the period just before the crime occurred, he had been in contact with a man named Jung, who had once worked as a delivery driver for the Mexico chicken chain in Daegu, where the victim couple had also worked. From there, Investigators uncovered a connection between the two. Young and Tom had both been arrested for petty theft and thieving back in 1991. After being released, they disappeared from all police records. Now both were living quietly in small rural counties within Gyeongsang-nam province. This connection turned out to be critical.
Hello.
Investigators learned that both Young and Kim were familiar with the victim couple, particularly with the operations of the fried chicken shop and Lee Sim-hee's daily routine. Based on these links and supporting
Hello
evidence,
from
on November
Philippines.
3rd, 1994, police arrested both men on suspicion of theft and murder. However, at the police station, both men denied all charges. They claimed they did not know Lee Sim-hee or Song Byung-jin and had no knowledge of the $3,700 withdrawn from the bank. Despite the police presenting evidence such as witness testimony from bank employees, police sketches, and accounts from people who had seen them near the crime scene, all of it was circumstantial. Nothing was concrete enough to press formal charges. As a result, police once again faced the same dilemma. No confession, no physical evidence, and no direct witnesses. In the end, both men were released after a few weeks in custody. Still, despite the lack of legal grounds to prosecute, police quietly placed them on a long-term watch list. Time passed in silence, and the people of Hapcheon gradually let the memory of that case fade, remembering only fragments. A young wife who vanished, a husband who was murdered, a culprit never caught, and an investigation riddled with errors. For the victim's family, especially Lee Sim-hee's parents, the pain endured, unresolved and unanswered. As the years went by, the 15-year statute of limitations quietly ticked away. By July 2008, the case officially expired. This meant that even if the perpetrator came forward, they could no longer be prosecuted under the law. But this case would eventually circle back, rewinding time more than a decade to a night that had gone largely unnoticed. At 12:20 a.m. on March the Bucheon Fire Department received a call reporting a fire at a small CD store in the Dodang-dong area. When they arrived, they found the shutter pulled down and the entrance locked. Firefighters were forced to break through the door. Fortunately, the flames hadn't spread and were extinguished in time. Police arrived on the scene and began inspecting the smoke-filled rubble with flashlights. In a hidden corner, they found a body, its head covered with a blanket. Upon removing it, they discovered the victim's face had been tightly wrapped in a plastic bag, with 2 layers of fabric wound around it. From the ankles to the chest, the body was bound in cloth strips and secured with packing tape, clear signs that this was no ordinary fire victim. Given the condition of the body, investigators noted that the victim appeared almost mummified. This raised suspicions that the fire had been deliberately set to destroy evidence and cover up a homicide. The victim was identified as Mr. Kim, 39 years old, the owner of the CD store. The autopsy revealed that he had died from severe blunt force trauma to the head and multiple bone fractures. Based on the initial forensic findings, police immediately began examining the scene. However, due to the heavy smoke and the forceful use of water during firefighting, the technical limitations at the time made it impossible to recover any valuable physical evidence. A follow-up autopsy also revealed no defensive wounds on the victim, suggesting he had not resisted his attacker. This unusual detail led police to suspect that Mr. Kim might have been drugged or rendered unconscious before he was killed. However, toxicology results showed no traces of drugs in his system, meaning he likely endured the assault fully conscious. This fueled the theory that the killer may have had a personal grudge and acted out of rage. Following this line of reasoning, police expanded their investigation to include people close to Mr. Kim. The first suspect was his wife, identified as Ms. A, 36 Firefighters had found the store's rolling shutter down when they arrived, a sign that the perpetrator may have been someone familiar with the layout and knew how to enter and exit without detection. Further investigation uncovered a life insurance policy Mr. Kim had taken out, which included a special clause. If he suffered a head injury, the payout would be $57,900, and if he died as a result of a crime or accident, the total benefit could rise to $289,600. Notably, the sole beneficiary of the policy was Ms. A, a fact that gave police even more reason to consider her a primary suspect. However, during questioning, Ms. A appeared genuinely shocked by the existence of the insurance policy and claimed she had no knowledge of it. She also provided a verifiable alibi for the time of the crime, forcing investigators to temporarily remove her from the suspect list. This turn of events prompted police to reevaluate the crime scene from a different angle. Upon reviewing the remaining evidence, they found it unconvincing to treat the case as a simple robbery. If the motive had truly been murder, there would have been no need to go to such lengths to lock the victim's body to the thoroughly. Based on that conclusion, authorities expanded the pool of suspects and began investigating all individuals with close ties to the victim. During this process, they took note of a young man who had frequently been seen near the scene, Im Seong-pil, 26 years old, who lived in a small room on the top floor of Mr. Kim's building. What made Seong-pil stand out was his long-standing relationship with the victim. He had lived upstairs for nearly 7 years and was considered almost like family. In recent years, he had even been helping Mr. Kim with work at the CD store on a regular basis. Given such a close relationship, one would expect Im Seong-pil to be devastated by Mr. Kim's death. Yet, for the time, Seong-pil showed no visible signs of shock or sorrow. He simply stood on the sidelines of the investigation, watching with a detached, indifferent expression, like someone entirely uninvolved. At first, this amusement could have been dismissed, but it soon drew attention when Seong-pil suddenly became defensive, especially when police began to suspect Mr. Kim's wife, Ms. A. It was at that moment, using their investigative instincts, the officers sensed
Okay, alis na sila?
Seong-pil's demeanor. They immediately shifted their focus and began questioning him more directly. Where had he been, and what was he doing the night of the murder? From that point forward, the interrogation deepened. Seong-pil claimed he had slept alone in his upstairs room on the night of the crime, but there was no one to corroborate his story. Police searched his personal belongings and quickly discovered a critical clue: a message on his phone urging him to run away, sent by none other than Ms. A. Rather than confront Seong-pil about the contents of the message directly, detectives cut straight to the heart of the matter. They looked him in the eyes and quoted an measured tune, as if a confession was inevitable. Why did you do it? Under pressure, Seong-pil covered his face with his hands, visibly distressed. After a few minutes of silence, he calmed down and began to confess. He admitted that he alone was responsible for the crime and insisted that Ms. A had no involvement whatsoever. Following his confession, police searched the upstairs room that he had been living. There, they uncovered a disturbing setup. One corner of the room contained several live feed monitors displaying real-time footage from various parts of the home, images of a living room, kitchen, and bedroom, indicating that someone was being watched without their knowledge. Upon inspecting the system further, police discovered that the live footage was being transmitted from surveillance cameras secretly installed by Seong-pil inside Mr. Kim's residence on the floor below. He had been constantly monitoring every private moment of the couple's life. To understand the deeper motivations behind this disturbing behavior, investigators had to revisit the history between Seong-pil and the couple, particularly Ms. A, dating back 7 years. Seong-pil had a troubled childhood, growing up in the relative's home and never knowing who his biological parents were. By the time he turned 19, he moved to Seoul on his own to survive. With no access to higher education, he took on a variety of jobs: manual labor, lottery ticket sales, and more. During this period, he met Ms. A, who was running a comic book shop. Recognizing his difficult circumstances, she helped him multiple times and gave him opportunities to stabilize his life. Coming from a background of emotional deprivation, Seong-pil was quickly drawn to the kindness and attention romantic feelings for him, though silently. In contrast to the hidden emotions Kim was harboring, Miss A had no idea how he felt. To her, he was simply like a younger brother. She introduced him to her husband, Mr. Kim, who, after learning about Sean Hill's background, allowed him to live in the upstairs room and work at the CD store. It was during those years living under the same roof that Im Sung-pil began to closely observe the couple's relationship. He gradually came to realize that Mr. Kim was not the ideal husband many believed him to be. Back in their hometown, Mr. Kim had been a successful pilot, and from the outside, it looked like they lived a happy, stable life. But in truth, Ms. A had once had an affair, a betrayal that left deep emotional scars on Mr. Kim. When rumors of the affair spread through the village, Mr. Kim, unable to bear the social pressure, abandoned farming and moved the family to Bushan. Starting over in a new city wasn't easy. Carrying shame and emotional wounds, he grew increasingly irritable. As a husband, he could never forgive his wife, and neighbors often heard him yelling at Miss A in public. While Mr. Kim was consumed by resentment, Im Sung-pil experienced a very different kind of emotional turmoil. Ms. A had once shown him kindness and support, while her husband frequently scolded, and at times even hit him. This left Sung-pil feeling resentful and angry. That's when he began secretly installing surveillance cameras throughout their home and quietly monitoring their daily lives. As his obsession grew, Sung-pil began eavesdropping on their conversations and even recording their intimate moments to watch them later. He became so fixated that he memorized Ms. A's daily routines, rushing to help her carry heavy trash bags, bringing her food when she seemed sad. Over time, this quiet attention touched her heart, and the two began a secret affair. Because of this questionable relationship, police initially suspected that Mr. Kim's death was the result of a conspiracy. Im Seong-pil and Miss A working together to murder him for the life insurance payout. However, Seong-pil adamantly denied her involvement and claimed she had nothing to do with the crime. In fact, he stated that from the very beginning, the plan had been orchestrated by Mr. Kim himself. That revelation prompted police to dig deeper. Seong-pil admitted to tying up and assaulting Mr. Kim, but insisted that he had only done so because Mr. Kim had asked him to. When pressed on the matter, Seong-pil explained that Mr. Kim was in deep debt at the time, and he offered to stage an assault to trick the insurance company into paying out a claim. Under the terms of his insurance policy, Mr. Kim would receive $57,900 if he sustained a serious head injury. In order to collect that payout, he devised a plan to fake a violent robbery. 3 days before the incident, Mr. Kim allegedly asked Im Sung-pil to help carry out the plan and promised to give him $19,300 if everything went according to schedule. And so, on the day of the incident, the two met at the CD store as planned, bringing the necessary materials. Mr. Kim instructed Seong-pil to bind his arms and legs with duct tape first so he wouldn't instinctively try to protect himself when struck in the head, ensuring the act appeared convincingly real. According to the original plan, he agreed that Mr. Kim's head would be covered with a towel so he couldn't see anything. Then, a plastic sheet and blanket would be added to prevent blood from splattering. Im Seong-pil had prepared a billiard cue to carry out the staged blow, just as they had discussed. And within moments, the stick came crashing down on Mr. Kim's head with such force that it snapped in half. From that moment on, Seong-pil had no memory of what happened next. During the autopsy, however, police were forced to reevaluate the truthfulness of
Thank you for
Seong-pil's statement.
watching.
The injuries on
Bye-bye.
Mr. Kim's body could not have resulted from
Thank
a single
you.
blow. His skull was shattered, and multiple bones
Take care,
throughout his
everyone.
body
God
were broken,
bless.
clear evidence
Bye.
of a brutal and sustained beating. This led investigators to seriously question the credibility of Seong-pil's